Clear prop.
Tower 738 Yankee number 2 following twin traffic, 3 mile final. Clear touch to 1 Charlie Bravo, make straight in runway 25, join 4 mile final.
This is Behind the Prop with United Flight Systems owner and licensed pilot Bobby Doss and his co-host, Major Airline Captain and designated pilot examiner Wally Mulhern. Now let's go Behind the Prop.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
I am fantastic as always. Today, of all days, has been a pretty crappy day in Houston, Texas. I don't know how many flights we flew, but it's below 10% of our normal day at United Flight Systems. I don't know. Did you have any check ride scheduled today?
I did not. No, I got in late last night from Germany and basically took the day off.
Well, there you go. My daughter's in Germany at a four-flight conference right now, which is pretty cool. She left from Sun and Fun and flew direct to Germany. She's getting to learn what it's like to be all grown up, and she doesn't realize how cool her opportunities are to be in Germany for her now fourth international trip. But um, maybe she'll ride back with you sometime.
Maybe so. That would be cool.
It would be. So today is all about this cruddy weather. We've done a number of shows on weather. It's kind of a mix between weather theory, weather thoughts, personal minimums, and honestly, the title of the show is "When Fine Wasn't Fine." I've got a few stories. I'm sure you have a few stories. I could tell many stories about other people, but I can remember being in the cockpit all by myself, thinking this exact statement. It looked like an easy flight, clear enough skies, right? But by the time I was halfway there, I knew I had made the wrong call. And my examples are just probably the same example about dumb, stupid, not thinking and planning mistakes. I think I've shared it a few times in the past, but biggest one that sticks out to me was I jumped in a Cessna RG with my golf clubs to go meet my dad in Brenham, crystal clear sky in Spring, Texas, launched it, and I'm more than 2,000 feet in the air. And I looked, oh, there's a bunch of clouds over there. Maybe I should have done some planning, a little bit better flight planning. Um, you're a pro pilot. Wally, you've never made a mistake like that, have you?
Uh, that's I'm trying not to laugh too hard. Yeah. Um, yeah, I make mistakes on every one of my flights. I've yet to fly a perfect flight. I got a few years left in the tank, and I'm trying for that perfect flight, but I haven't gotten there yet.
So, I mean, I didn't even think to look at the weather in Brenham, Texas, because I was in Spring, Texas, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky, 10,000 feet, crystal clear. And man, how many times do pilots make a similar mistake? Normally, at the school, people are worried about the winds at the school, but they're going somewhere else. We talk about this a lot, but we got to think broader, bigger picture, bring it in. So for me on that day, fine was not fine. It was not fine. And there's a lot of examples that we can talk about, professional examples. Delta Flight 191 in Dallas, Texas, plane crashed, microburst. That's a personal story for you, Wally. Why was fine not fine that day?
Yeah, I was in Dallas that day, and I we the company I worked for, I think we had an airplane over there having some avionics work done, and I had flown it in. I want to say this happened on a Friday, but I flew the airplane in on Thursday night. We had a freight contract. I dropped the freight off, and then I went and I took the airplane to the avionics shop. I left it there. I went to a hotel, and I got up the next day when they had all the work done. And I hopped in the airplane. I want to say this was at one of the, one of the outlying airports in the Dallas Fort Worth area, maybe Meacham Field. If it's probably renamed, it's probably something different now. But anyway, I flew back to Monroe, Louisiana, which is about 300 miles, about an hour and a half flight, and a Beechcraft Baron. And I took off from the Dallas area, and there was significant weather. and I did a lot of deviating, mostly south. And when I got to Monroe, I hopped out of the airplane. One of the line guys came up. He said, "Did you hear what just happened in Dallas?" And I said, "No." And he told me that Delta had crashed. It was a Lockheed L-1011, I believe, and quite a few people lost their lives flying through a
Mhm.
microburst.
And so things we can't see, things we can't be aware of, but we can do some planning to solve those. Another example from our research says Southern Airways Flight 242 flew into hail. Man, hail would be devastating to an airliner. It'd be devastating to a single engine piston plane. It'd be devastating to a vehicle like and a roof. We don't want hail. Hail is very
Right,
bad. If you
right.
want to learn more about that one, go read about that one. And then Braniff Flight 352 flew into thunderstorms, another tragic accident. It kind of boils down to, and we have no idea why these pilots did what they did or what happened, and I don't want to speculate. But for me, it was the lack of planning. For others, it's I think I see more student pilots underestimating what can change. Um, we look at one ATIS, one METAR. We kind of lock in that that's not going to be any different in an hour, but it's probably going to be different in an hour, especially in Houston, Texas. The the weather can change to be all four seasons in Houston, Texas. And too often we underestimate winds. There's a million tools out there to help us understand what's going to happen with the winds. My favorite one is Windy. I talk about it all the time. It was actually an app that was created for sailors, people who sail non-powered boats, and to help them know what the winds are going to do. It's a great visual on your computer or on your phone and gives you some ideas of what's coming. Just recently, I used it for golf. There was a front coming through. I was playing in a pretty big golf tournament, and I wanted to know what the winds were going to be when I got on the back nine. Very useful because I needed to know what the winds were going to be doing to make my plan for that. Same thing for flying. We need to be able to know what's coming. But if it's 6 knots of crosswind, Wally, at 9 a.m. At Hooks Airport, what's the likelihood that it's going to get less by noon?
About 2%.
And if it does, more weather flowed through. Probably more
Yeah,
bad weather flowed through that made the
yeah,
pressure drop to such a level
yeah.
that the winds aren't blowing. Um, I remember a smart pilot told me one time on a clear day, you can assume that it's going to be very, very bumpy. I was like, well, that's weird. I thought it was a clear day, right? The wind's
Right.
blowing all the bad weather out of there,
Yeah.
and it's probably going to be really bumpy. What about the ceilings? I think I've heard too many kids, young men and women in my life, want to go solo, and they said it's 3,500 at College Station. Surely I'll be fine. I'm going to College Station. It's not that far away. If the ceilings are at 3,500 at 3 p.m., what's the likelihood that they're going to get higher by 5 p.m. in this part of the country?
Yeah. Well, higher by 5 p.m. It's I would say 3 to 5. There's not going to be a whole lot of change.
No. And if there is change I always talk about the northwest fronts coming through Houston. If I was going to check weather, I'd be looking like Amarillo northwest, right? Like what was
Right.
there 4 hours ago? Because that's what's here probably now or going to be here in the next couple of hours. I don't look to Florida, what's happening in Florida, because very
Right.
rarely is weather going to come back this direction.
Right.
Um, but I definitely don't just look at Hooks Airport, right? And so I joke, everybody that's at United Flight Systems learning how to be a pilot right now, they are learning how to be a weatherman first and foremost. We all pilots become weathermen. And the one that I know almost got a couple of our students and an instructor a while back is temperature change at altitudes. And it was a cold front. They weren't worried. They left when it was 60 degrees Fahrenheit. But boy, when they got just 100 miles northwest and a cold front came through, it was freezing and they picked up quite a bit of ice. I think ice scares me the most in a single engine piston plane. Thunderstorms, I'm just not going to play with, but ice is the invisible gotcha that I think we all have to worry about when we think it looks fine because we can't see what isn't fine. Do you have any ice stories in the Saratoga or any of your single engine world, Wally?
I actually do. We flew the Saratoga up to Denver. I don't know, a year and a half ago, and we got up there and got in a little bit of icing, a little bit of rime icing. I told ATC I needed lower, and they could not give it to us.
Mm,
Um, it was just a little. It was probably what you call trace icing, but there was icing out there, and I was I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. We never really lost any
you just didn't
performance
pop the
or
boots? You just didn't pop
what?
the
Yeah,
boots on your way?
no. I looked for the button. I didn't see the button on there. So yeah, it was, and shame on me. It snuck up on us, and well, I probably didn't do a very good job of planning for it.
Yeah, and I'm not into indicting anyone, but it just is a lesson for everybody listening. It will sneak up and bite you. And when that ice bites you, you can't just undo it if you don't have icing equipment or anything to help. There's no
Yeah,
way it's just going to come off. And I would be panicking. If I saw a little bit in the corner of my windshield, I'd be like, "Holy cow, what's going on in the tail? What's going on in the wingtips?" Like I don't know where I'm collecting ice, but I would be very, very nervous, very, very quick.
yeah, yeah. And I will say, these three case studies that we mentioned, these all happened a long time ago. I know the Delta one, I think, was in the summer of 1986, so that was 40 years ago. And the Southern Airways and Braniff were around that time frame. The amount of information, it's, well, yeah, the internet. Okay, the internet was not a thing in 1986. The way you'd get your weather briefing in general aviation is you would walk into a flight service station or call them up on the phone and say, I'm going from here to there. And some guy would give you a briefing, or female, not necessarily a guy, but somebody would give you a weather briefing. And it might take 15 minutes for them to give you this in-depth briefing. And boy, in 15 minutes, you're writing things down. Maybe you're forgetting things. And if you happen to be at an airport that had a flight service station, you could go in, you could actually get some printouts would help. But it we did not have, or back then, it did not have the dynamic information like we have right now at our fingertips, our phone, our iPad, whatever. Boy, we can check, I sit in check rides and I'll say to my applicant, okay, we're going from here to there. We're going to divert to this airport in the middle. What's the weather at this diversion airport? And it's an airport they've never heard of. And within 20 seconds, they're telling me what the weather is just because we have this information available to us. For flight or any Garmin pilot, we can use ADS-B data to basically paint sort of a radar picture. It's not really radar, but it's close enough. And so, um, man, we have so much available. And I'm not saying, well, back in the day we walked 5 miles to school uphill both ways. I don't mean to sound like that. Maybe I am sounding like that a little bit, but
You had to use an
um,
abacus to get the forecast? Is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
yeah, absolutely. You know, we used to at United Airlines, or it was Continental back then. We would you go into a room before your flight, and the name of the room was called the weather room, and there would be this paperwork packet for you that was significant, and it would have your forecasts, NOTAMs. It would have everything. Where now it's all delivered to us electronically. We can update it, and man, the information. It's just like the internet. I mean, we have so much information at our fingertips, and that's a good thing. Okay, so
For sure.
yeah,
Recently, I was trying to show a few people at the school kind of how I look at the weather using windy, and they were like, "Oh, well, it looks like it's going to be low overcast at that time." And I said, "Well, wait a second. There's five different data sources in windy. We can pick a different data source, and we pick like version two of a data source, and it wasn't cloudy. What It showed no visible moisture. And then we picked three, and it was kind of between the two. And then we picked four, and it was cloudy again. I just These are forecasts. You, I'm not going to send my family into a forecast. I'm going to
Right.
do my due diligence and do better than that. Now, I'm going to use the forecast, of course, but kind of like back to a few weeks ago when Brandon Cooks was on the show, if there's any question, he ain't going. It's a no go. So, what are these subtle signs? Part two of this show is what are those subtle signs we normally miss? You can't look at, well, I only use WeatherBug. Well, maybe that's not the best source. I don't know. I'm not saying anything bad about WeatherBug, and I'm a fan of Windy, but it's not always perfect. I can show you 100 check rides that I've watched want to be canceled that there's a picture on the wall because they finished their check ride that day.
Yeah.
Forecasts are not actual weather, they're forecasts.
Right. Right. And, to me, and this is the one piece of the weather puzzle that most of us probably don't pay attention to. I mean, sure, we look at the winds, we look at the ceilings, we probably look at well, we might look at the temperature if it's extreme. But the one thing that we don't, we look at the altimeter setting, we just kind of go, oh, okay. But that might be the best single marker of how the weather is the pressure. Low pressure, low weather. High pressure, high weather. And what do I mean by low weather? Bad weather. High weather, good weather. Low is low, low is bad, high is good. Very
So
simple.
pressure was hard for me early on. When you say low pressure, are you saying the numbers get smaller on the altimeter and high pressure, the numbers get bigger on the altimeter?
Well, just look at the altimeter setting. Yeah. So if and it is really a prevailing out. Don't use standard pressure as your standard. That is just a broad-based standard, 2992. Um, Most places will have a prevailing pressure. For instance, out in the Pacific Ocean, out in Hawaii, 3030 is probably about standard. If you got altimeter setting of 2992 out there, you got bad weather. Here around where we are, I'd say the prevailing altimeter is probably 3000, something like that. But if you see 2972, that's probably pretty bad weather here in Houston.
And so, have you seen pressure drops maybe from like a morning check ride to an afternoon check ride, and you're like, "Oh, this young man or woman has no idea what they're getting into."
Yeah, and it's like you said, you can look at the forecast and everything, but I'll say, okay, what's the weather here? What's the weather 50 miles northwest? And we just happen to have, College Station, Texas is about 50 miles northwest of here, maybe 60 miles, something like that. And that's a really good marker for me. If I see we got an altimeter setting of 3005 here and it's 2976 in College Station, there's a big pressure difference between here and there. So there's going to be a significant weather change.
And if I was a 25-hour private pilot student, I would not have understood a word you just said. Like, how do we explain that to people that are listening that can translate a what is that? You just said 15 points. So 30 goes to 2985. Is that something to be concerned about? Is that telling me that the weather's deteriorating?
Yeah, especially if it's close. I mean, if it's 500 miles away, that's one thing. We talk about gradient. Well, that means there's a significant pressure change in a short period of time. So it's a high gradient. The hill is steeper, if that makes sense. Okay. a
It
steeper
does.
hill. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
the faster it's dropping by bigger numbers, the more I should be concerned.
absolutely. Well, if it's going the wrong way, it might be going the right way, and you can be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, so now I can see solo students saying, "Well, Bobby, it went up 0.05 in the last hour. Surely I can go on the next ATIS." And I'll say, "I will wait till the next ATIS." But yeah,
Maybe. Yeah.
it can get better, no question.
Right.
But with higher pressure, does produce maybe higher winds, so that could be
Yeah.
an issue. Doesn't mean it's just going to be better. It's just we're getting rid of some of that moisture and some of that temperature change that causes moisture, rain, fog, other things, right? I We have a pretty strict rule about temperature dew point spread, and it's because all these engines are mostly carbonated. Um, what are your
I think
thoughts?
you mean carbureted.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Sorry.
You said carbonated, but hey, that's okay.
The what are you what are your thoughts on temperature dew point spread? I've had every argument in the world about this one, Wally. What should a private student pilot be thinking about as it relates to dew point and temperature?
Yeah, well, that spread, the smaller the spread, the higher the humidity is. So, you back in the day when you watched the 10 o'clock news and the weatherman came on and he said 82% humidity. And I don't know, does 82% equate to an 8-degree temperature dew point spread? I don't know. I don't know what those numbers are. But having said this, one kind of example I give to my applicants, I say, okay, we uh my especially if it's an afternoon check ride, I try to use real world scenarios. And so if I have an afternoon check ride, they start at either noon or 1 o'clock, and I have them plan their cross country to leave 2 hours after we start the ground portion. So we're leaving at 2 p.m. local time. And maybe that first leg is 2.5 hours, and then we'll stop and get fuel and do, get something to eat, and then we're going to fly the last leg. And I will say, okay, the temperature right now at our second destination, the airport that we're going to get to about 9 o'clock p.m., the temperature is 22. The dew point is 19. What, are there any concerns for that? Most of the applicants, I'd say 90% of them are pretty in tune. Okay, well, I got 22, 19. Sun's going down. It's going to get cooler. Now, most likely the dew point will go down, but probably not as fast as the temperature. So now if you've got a temperature that is equal to the dew point, we're going to have some sort of visible moisture, fog, or low clouds or something. So yeah, it can cause some problems.
I think that's the biggest thing I've learned being a pilot about the weather is that those two things are relative to where we see visible moisture saturate the air, which makes visible moisture, clouds, fog, whatever. And we should, as pilots, all be able to probably calculate the basis of most clouds because of that math. And I challenge people around the flight school because they're learning. I'm trying to help them understand this stuff. If the temperature is 20 and the dew point is 18, where would you think the first chance of seeing visible moisture would be, Wally, as it
Not
relates to
very high.
altitude?
Not very high.
Not
Yeah.
very high. So if the lapse rate by the FAA books say 2 degrees Celsius for every 1,000 feet, we might get into visible moisture at 1,000 feet.
Right.
And that's now we might not have that. It might not be humid enough, but the numbers might say it could be. I had this picture. It was a great picture. I've lost it, but I was probably flying back from somewhere around 2,500 feet, and at 2,500 feet, looking through the straight ahead, I could not see, and it was just very small layer, but it was exactly where the temperature and the dew point were the same, and it might have
Wow.
only been 30 or 40 feet, but it was one of those days where I had the picture and I said, this is what you could get into, and this is why we won't let you go. Um, because the temperature and the dew point were equal and the air was becoming saturated with moisture. So it's a sneaky one that could really bite people and it could disorient you really, really quick. The other one is winds. Um, we've had a couple of incidents where people have been a little bit of metal. No one's been hurt, thank goodness. But on a day where the airport changes direction of landings like 3 times when you're in the pattern, that might be the sign that today's not the best day to be practicing in the pattern, Wally.
Yeah.
You've had some really crazy experiences at my flight school with students. How bad is crosswind for a rookie pilot?
Yeah, it's probably not a good thing. Now, I will say this, at some point, we've got to be able to handle, crosswinds to an certain extent. I've been at flight schools where I've walked in and I see 12 CFIs sitting around, and I say, "Well, how come nobody's flying today?" They go, "Oh, we got a 12-knot crosswind," and I say, "Why aren't you on your phone on the phone to your more advanced students, saying,
Amen.
get out here, get out here?" And maybe some of the CFIs aren't confident in their ability. I've got a new airplane. I've got a tail dragger. I've got a Saratoga. I've got 2 airplanes. I- I'd I'd be I would be fine landing the Saratoga in 25, 30 knots of crosswind, direct crosswind. Absolutely fine. Um, that tail dragger, my limit's about 5 knots right now because of
There
my,
you go.
so it's it's a big deal. And of course I don't need to go. So
Well, I think that's a great segue into part three. What are some of our weatherproof decision tools that we can make? And personal minimums are at the top of that list, right? If you have those and you stick to those, that's what's going to make you a safer, better pilot. So today, I would say if I was going to take a trip and I was going to take my beautiful wife with me to go somewhere, if the destination said more than 15 knots, I probably wouldn't fly. I might jump in the car and go. Um, my car has autopilot as well, but the net of that is I don't have to fly and I have other options. So that's part of my personal minimums. Companies are going to push pilots to do different things, but if I know my number's 15 knots and I stick to it, I don't say, well, 16's almost 15, so I'm going to go with 16. 15's the limit. How do you, Wally, the tail dragger is one example, but what is your icing number for the Saratoga? What would be your personal minimums? How many feet do you want to stay away from potential icing levels in the Saratoga?
oh, for sure 2,000 feet.
Yeah. And I probably this has grown into a fish story where I tell everyone at the flight school, everyone around the flight school, my personal minimum is 10,000 feet. And it's kind of that just like I'm never gonna go if there's a chance of ice. Because I
Right.
don't have to go, right?
Right.
Um, you don't have to go either, but you're probably much more astute than me. But 10,000 is the quote unquote service ceiling of a Cessna 172. I'm just not going to risk it if I can get to within 10,000 feet of the ice. Um, is it going to really get me 10,000 feet away? Probably not. But how many stories have we read about people that had a temperature inversion? They had super liquid cold droplets that ruined their day. Like, that's the one story I'm not. Fire and ice scare the heck out of me, no matter what.
Yeah, and it's not just, well, there's no clouds out there. If there are clouds above, that moisture may be dropping.
Hmm. And so it has grown into this fish story where 10,000 feet is my number, but I really don't think I would fly to Oklahoma tomorrow if I thought there was visible moisture at 10,000 feet because then I could get drops on me. I just don't want to take that chance. Is
Right.
there any personal minimum other than the 5 knots and the tail dragger that you think helped you be a safer pilot?
Yeah, well, in that airplane, I'm not flying into a cloud. I'm not flying in IMC conditions. You know, uh, yeah, there's and just offhand, I'm thinking, and nothing is coming to mind, but it's really kind of a day by day uh, thought process that goes through. One thing I have done over the years is, and I'd encourage all of the pilots out there listening, understand the weather in your local area. I know if I walk out of my house and the temperatures are unseasonably cool, okay, and that could happen in July. I could walk out and go, "Oh wow, it's not crazy hot. It actually feels good out here." But odds are the wind is out of the north. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so odds are if I'm going to Hooks Airport, I know I'm taking off on 3-5 today. Odds are we're going to have a significant temperature dew point spread because we're probably bringing in dry air from the north. Typically, what we have is when the prevailing winds here in Houston are out of the south. Probably, I don't know, 75% of the time would be my guess. Um,
Wet,
and
hot air.
right. So what do we have coming from the south? Exactly. Wet air over the Gulf of Mexico. So we're probably going to have clouds.
I hate to correct you, but you corrected me earlier. It's called the Gulf of America now, Wally. I don't know if you
Oh
got that
God, yeah.
memo.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So you've been a great mentor to me. I think we've become really good friends. What would you tell the person that's listening that maybe passed their private check ride yesterday? What, and I'm putting you on the spot, so I apologize, but what three personal minimums would you say they should pick and live by to kind of push their flying career forward as a solo private pilot, not with an instructor, but in the learning phase. But if I'm going to go launch a plane by myself, what are those three things you would say, hey, this is really important. Keep these and grow them, but keep these as I'm going to keep these as brick walls.
Yeah. Are you talking about a non-instrument rated pilot?
Of course, they just got
Yeah.
they passed their
Yeah.
private certificate yesterday.
Okay. Well, I would say wind is definitely one of them. I'm going to lump ceiling and visibility in another one. And then the last one is going to be my favorite one, my 5 reasons, and it's fuel. How much fuel are you uh, willing to land with? And I don't know. This is an informal poll that I have been taking, but I'll ask all my applicants for, on a commercial and, well, even an instrument, commercial instrument and private, we talk about our cross country and I'll say, okay, how much fuel are we going to land with? And they'll tell me in gallons and I'll say, okay, how much is that in minutes? And uh, I will ask them, I'll say, well, what's your personal minimum for landing fuel? And I, the majority of people now tell me, well, I want an extra 15 minutes. I want my personal minimum is to land with 45 minutes worth of fuel. And I cringe. I say, man, that's a lot lower than what I'm going to land with. If heck in the Saratoga, that's 15 gallons, but in your typical Cherokee or 172, you're talking about 6 gallons. I mean, that's 3 gallons in each tank. That's not very much.
No, and imagine if you took off and you sunk the tanks and you just had one drip out of each of those. Like, how can you manage that? To me, that's like you're saying, like ice, fire, and lack of fuel scare the heck out of me.
Yeah,
So I want to land with as much as I can. Sure, there's going to be times where there's limitations, but much like I don't have to go, there's nothing preventing me from stopping multiple times, going on a trip. Like if I'm going to Florida, the 182 could probably make it in one, maybe two stops.
Yeah.
What's the difference in three or four for me and my family? I mean,
Right.
I can do it. And I probably want to stretch and take a bio break for Bobby anyway, right? Like,
Right.
I don't think that's a big deal for me.
My rule of thumb is 2.5 hours. I don't want to be in the airplane for more than 2.5 hours. Now, if I do the calculations and I realize I can get there in 3 hours, and I know I've got 5 hours of fuel on board, will I probably go for 3 hours? Yes, I will. But I will also have uh, a couple of pit stops in mind along the way.
Mm. And I think that's what's important that I would have never thought of as a younger pilot, meaning younger in my flight time, is that all airports are always open, mostly, unless they're notamed, but it's not that big of a deal to divert a little bit and stop. Even 30 miles out of the way is not that big of a time delay if it's going to make you a safer, better pilot.
Yeah, yeah.
So that trip to Brenham, I ultimately had to turn back and didn't get to play golf. What is your turn back decision? How does a professional pilot who has these aircraft that you fly in general aviation with your family, what's your turn back decision, Wally? If you're going from here to Monroe, Louisiana, what are you thinking? And when are you going to decide to come back or stop? Like, you've got to have an ego like the rest of us. You can do it.
Yeah, no, I've made stops. I've been coming back to Houston before and stopped just north of here up in Lufkin, which is about 60 miles, just because I didn't like the weather in Houston. Hey, we can stop. Heck, I had to, I could Uber home. It'd be expensive, but I could probably Uber home. Um, and first of all, okay, you stop, you get on the ground. It's a little easier to make decisions in a less noisy environment. I get a good Wi-Fi signal. Okay, I can really look at weather. First of all, I can go use the restroom. I can put fuel in the airplane. If I've got fuel, if I've got lots of fuel, I've got lots of options. So,
Hmm.
and at the higher level, I can't remember the last time I've diverted for weather. It's been a while, but we do it. It happens.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the sooner the better. If there's no
Yeah,
other way to phrase it, it's the sooner the better. That decision that's made in a panic is really going to be more than likely an unfortunate decision, right? It's going to be too late. So the sooner you can make it, the better. I told the story recently a couple times flying back from Dothan. I was thinking about fuel when we got to 2,000 feet, and I was already noticing the headwind and the math was not adding up. And I was thinking about where we were going to stop for fuel. If you can make that decision 2.5 hours before you need to make it, you're going to be much better off than waiting until you get to a point where you're in the wow, 45 minutes is like now I got to get on the ground. That's
yeah,
way too late. So if you're going to make a decision about turn back or taking a pause in the flight plan that you're on, my biggest piece of advice would be to do that sooner than later, because that's going to be the easiest time to make it. And yeah, we all have egos. I don't want to say no. I want to go all the time, but I have my lines. They're hard lines, and I'm just not going to push my minimums at all.
yeah. Well, we at the airline we joke about this is that the person who makes the first decision to divert is in pretty good shape. And because let's say you're coming from the West, you're trying to get into Houston and you end up diverting to Austin. Well, if you're the 17th airplane to divert to Austin, guess what? You're the 17th one to get fuel. You're the 17th one to launch back to Houston. The guy that diverted first, man, he's out there on the end of the runway ready to push the power up as soon as the weather comes up. So there is something to be said for that.
That's a good tip. The sooner the better will play true no matter whether you're a GA pilot or whether you're a professional pilot. So the next time the weather looks fine, remember your tools, remember your limits, your personal minimums, decide early, trust the subtle signs, Pressure is the big one that we don't think about enough. And let's not let fine fool us and get us in trouble. As always, fly safely and stay behind the prop.
Thanks for checking out the Behind the Prop podcast. Be sure to click subscribe and check us out online at behindtheprop.com. Behind the Prop is recorded in Houston, Texas. Creator and host is Bobby Doss. Co-host is Wally Mulhern. The show is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to replace actual flight instruction. Thanks for listening, and remember, fly safe.